Well, with having said the lobby, we are the political voice, so lobbying absolutely fits. How do I? Yeah, there we are. We are the only intersectoral network, which means we represent all disciplines of culture and the arts and heritage, and really believe that culture serves as a fundamental cornerstone for shaping a shared future in an open, globally connected Europe. And that globally connected is really important. I'll get back to that a little bit later, ensuring the sustainability of our planet and fostering plural, open, and caring societies. When Culture Action Europe was founded 30 years ago, we are celebrating our 30th birthday this year during our annual conference in Malmö, just a month from now. We were founded under the name United Networks as the network of networks. And still, we count in our membership more than 40 trans-European cultural networks. And in a way, that networks of the networks is still the backbone of our organization, also our agency when it comes to lobbying. And in addition to that, we've got more than 70 national networks and associations, but also individual organizations, cities and regions, foundations, and individual members. And just like in the response rate of the study, we are quite weak in Finland. So I think, and I hope that we can use this opportunity to follow up conversations on how we can link the Finnish advocacy conversation to the European one, maybe in a more structured way. So what we do, we advocate for culture and the arts, we inform political decision making, but that informing really works through what we call very recently decoding, not only decoding, but also encoding. We have a very popular newsletter with our members that is called the Brussels Decoder, where we try to translate the policy language of the discourse in Brussels into normal human language. To understand where the challenges and opportunities really are at this very moment in Brussels. And of course, the other way around, if we talk to policymakers, we need to encode, so to speak, the needs of the cultural sector into a policy language. Then co-creating and sharing knowledge is really important. One example you've just heard, the study together with Pantea, where we invite our members, mainly the networks that again invite their members, to contribute to gathering data, but also then interpreting and analyzing data. Another prominent example is the culture, health and well-being work that we've been doing in the Culture for Health project with a big study and policy recommendations and a big database of best practice across Europe, but also on the sustainability of the cultural sectors. And right now we are in the middle of conducting a rather major study, which we call State of Culture in Europe Barometer, that we will launch during the summer, where we really look at how the cultural sectors across Europe are perceived in public opinion and policy making and by their peers. To create and how they are linked to the policy making that happens in Brussels, to really get the temperature of the state of culture in Europe that is informed bottom up. So please stay tuned to that. You can also still contribute to that because the survey is still open on our website. And of course, we lead projects and campaigns, and that's maybe mainly what we talk about now. I want to mention our two main campaigns. As time is going fast, I will kind of flip through the one that is maybe seemingly least important for this conversation, a cultural goal. We advocate as the European network for the cultural sectors in a coalition of global networks for a cultural goal as an addition, as a standalone goal, an 18th sustainable development goal, so to speak. Just like education has its own goal, we think that culture needs its own goal, because if we talk about mainstreaming culture throughout all policy areas, that's only possible for culture to take this enabling role if it is enabled itself as a strong sector. That is a campaign that I invite you to follow. The conference, not on the future of Europe, I had almost said, but the conference on the future of the United Nations that is coming up in September will be a decisive turning point for that. And then the other campaign, which is now in the run-up to the European elections, but also in its aftermath, crucial for us and hopefully impactful, is a cultural deal for Europe, where we advocate for a central place for culture in Europe's future. In a way, in analogy to the Green Deal, which is for us a big example how greening can be put at the heart of policymaking, and I think something similar needs to happen for culture. We've been running that campaign since before 2019. Here are some advocacy milestones where we think we have made an impact. You may remember that in 2019, all of a sudden, there was no dedicated commissioner for culture anymore, at least no one with the title culture in their portfolio. We've successfully campaigned for a commissioner for culture. And we fear that that campaign may be needed again after summer. And maybe not to get a commissioner for culture, but to get a sufficiently empowered commissioner for culture, and depending under which vice presidency and under which other policy frames, be it innovation, education, culture, sport, audiovisual, there are a lot of options that we carefully need to weigh. We've been pushing for 2% of the national recovery and resilience plans to be dedicated to culture. That was unevenly distributed across Europe, but let's say not all the way to 2%, but average of 2%, average 12 billion euros have been dedicated to culture, which we find quite a success. Also, the current work plan for culture that needs to be renegotiated next year has priorities like working conditions, health and well-being, artistic freedom, to which we could input. We had organized a consultation with cultural stakeholders and the member states, and are really positively surprised about how that work plan turned out. And of course, Martin has told you everything about the working conditions efforts, so I'm not going to go into that, but just to show that the campaign has had its successes in the past. At the moment, we have eight calls, 8 pleas in our campaign. Of course, increased funding through funding programs. We are advocating for including in Ukraine in a cultural deal, including Ukraine, a cultural deal for Ukraine in the cultural deal for Europe. To develop a new and inclusive EU cultural policy hand in hand with civil society. Collaborate with philanthropic sectors to address current and future cultural emergencies. Establish common standards for working conditions. I mean, that's what is where the momentum is there. I think I'll go a little bit deeper into that in a second. And accelerate efforts to integrate culture into sustainable development and the European Green Deal. Beyond the new European Bauhaus, I may say. And prioritize culture in discussions regarding the future of our continent in and after the 2024 European Parliament elections. Just as a little sideline, the Conference on the Future of Europe, to which we have contributed, mentions in their final report culture only in passing, which is a major disappointment, of course. We've got all these campaign tools for the different pleas, including a cultural meal for Europe cookbook. This is a more the funny part of the campaign, but I'm sharing with you the Jello, ghost Jello recipe, which you can find there, that addresses the working conditions. Based on the quote of one of the artists that we've been speaking to, we are invisible for social security in many countries. We are ghosts. So we are contributing to Ghost Jello. So the prospects for the future, we were really really happy to read the letter of the European Commission, the response to the European Parliament with its 13 actions, where it is stressed that the Commission wants to strengthen the implementation of existing legislation, invest in analysis and research, health and safety, undeclared work, contractual practices, and so on. We applaud that, of course. Considering the social conditionality for Creative Europe and Horizon Europe, and I'm aware of proposals for that are on the table already, that prepared by some MEPs. Reviewing the new European agenda for culture with the aim of developing a new EU strategic framework. The strategic framework was already mentioned. I think that will be the major tool for the sector to input in through national bottom-up conversations and network conversations that can come together in a Culture Action Europe coordinated action. And of course, we would be happy to contribute to a high-level round table that is proposed. Other aspects that have already been mentioned, like the taxonomy of artistic profiles and what an artist really is. There was reference to the UNESCO definition. I would also like to reference everything that has already happened in the area of higher arts education, where in the Bologna process and the tuning process and the qualifications frameworks that have been developed, there are quite clear profiles of what an artist is in Europe. So I think we can tap into a lot of existing knowledge already. And then finally, but very decisively and clearly and without any compromise, we support. We've seen that in the study as well. More than 80% of the respondents would be in favor of an EU directive. We know an EU directive is very ambitious, but I think we have to be ambitious. And we would support, propose, and push for a directive wherever possible. And I think with that, my 15 minutes are more than over, and I'll stop here. But I'm, of course, very happy to answer questions. One more last thing with regards to the European Parliament elections. I invite you to look at our website, where you will find the Pop the Vote campaign, where we work with young activists, artivists, change makers across Europe to get communities to the ballot box in June, and hopefully flip the rather bleak outlook to these elections at the moment. Thanks very much.